Have you ever wondered why our workplaces, which are always on the hunt for new talent and fresh ideas, so often manage to overlook a huge pool of brilliant, capable minds? Well, today, we're diving into neurodiversity and work to figure out how our traditional systems might just be failing to unlock some incredible human potential. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's start with a number that should really make all of us stop and think. An estimated 80% of autistic people are unemployed worldwide. 80%. I mean, that's not just a statistic, is it? It's a massive, massive loss of talent and perspective, and it forces us to ask some really tough questions. And that leads us to the big question for this whole explainer. Why? If all these autistic people are willing and able to work, and they have skills that companies are desperate for, what is going wrong? To figure that out, we've got to look a lot deeper than just a resume. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the specific problems that pop up in hiring. Then, we're going to zoom out to look at the big ideas that shape how we think about disability in the first place. We'll explore this really powerful concept of neurodiversity, get clear on what it actually means, and then we'll bring it all back home to some real, tangible solutions that can honestly change the whole game. Okay, first up, the hiring hurdle. Because this is it. This is the spot where the disconnect so often begins. For so many neurodivergent people, the simple process of just trying to get a job is absolutely filled with invisible barriers. So a recent study from UCL shows this. Just staggering gap. Look at this. While 83% of neurotypical adults are in full-time jobs, that number just plummets to 38.2% for autistic adults. That is less than half. We're not talking about a small difference here. That's a chasm. But here's what's so fascinating. That same study found that a lot of the frustrations people have with hiring are actually universal. Yeah, people of all neurotypes, and that includes neurotypical candidates, are just tired of interviews that feel more like a test of their social skills than their actual ability to do the job. They want more clarity, more flexibility. Sound familiar? I thought so. But on top of all those shared frustrations, autistic candidates face these extra, unique barriers. There's this immense pressure to mask, to hide their autistic traits. There's the worry about stigma, the difficulty with those super vague questions like, so tell me about yourself, and the sensory overload that can happen in a sterile, fluorescent-lit interview room. All these layers just pile on top of each other, and they really help explain that massive gap we just saw. So why do these barriers even exist? I mean, where did they come from? To really get to the root of it, we have to look at two totally different ways of thinking about disability itself. This is where we get to the core of the whole issue. Okay, so on one hand, you have what's called the medical model. This way of thinking sees the problem as being inside the person, some kind of deficit that needs to be cured or fixed so they can fit into the world as it is. But then, on the other hand, you have the social model, and it completely flips the script. It says the disability isn't in the person. It's in a society that builds barriers and refuses to accommodate difference. The problem isn't the person in the wheelchair, it's the building that only has stairs. See the difference? And we're not talking about abstract ideas here. These barriers are very, very real. Attitudinal barriers, that's just prejudice or having low expectations of someone. Environmental ones could be an office that's just too loud and too bright. Communication barriers happen when we rely only on unspoken social cues that not everyone is going to pick up on. And institutional barriers, well, those are the rigid one-size-fits-all hiring policies we were just talking about. And all of this leads us to a really powerful idea that builds right on top of that social model. It's called the neurodiversity paradigm. And this is where the conversation really starts to shift in a big way. So the term was first used way back in 1998 by a sociologist named Judy Singer, who is herself autistic. And the idea of neurodiversity is basically this. Differences in our brains aren't deficits. They're just differences. They're a natural and valuable part of human variation, kind of like how biodiversity is essential for a healthy planet. I mean, think about it. A world with only one type of tree would be pretty fragile, right? Well, a world with only one type of mind is just as limited. This quote from Patty Lushman just nails it. The whole idea challenges this deep-seated assumption that there's one normal or right way for a brain to be, and that anyone who's different from that is somehow broken or flawed. And listen to this quote from P.J. Hollenbeck about Tourette's syndrome. It's such a powerful example of that social model in action. It just shifts the focus completely. The issue isn't the tick itself, it's the onlooker's judgment and reaction to it. It perfectly captures that radical shift in perspective. Now, this next part is really important because there is a super common misconception about this term. So let's get really clear on what neurodivergent actually covers. Let me just say it plainly. Neurodivergent is not just another word for autistic. The concept is so much broader, and it's meant to be that way. It's intentionally inclusive. The neurodivergent umbrella is huge. It covers this whole wide spectrum of neurological variations. So yeah, it includes autism and ADHD, but also learning differences like dyslexia and dyscalculia. It includes conditions like OCD, Tourette's, and epilepsy. It also covers a lot of mental health conditions like bipolar disorder and personality disorders, and even things like PTSD, because trauma can literally change how the brain develops and functions. Okay, so let's take this powerful new way of thinking and bring it all the way back to where we started, employment. How does shifting our view from seeing a deficit to seeing a difference actually help solve this hiring crisis? Well, the neurodiversity paradigm basically reframes the entire conversation. What some people might have seen as a pathology now becomes part of someone's identity. Instead of only focusing on the challenges, we start looking for unique strengths. The goal shifts from trying to fix the person to advocating for changing the environment to accommodate them. And maybe most importantly, different ways of thinking are no longer a problem to be solved, they're a valuable asset to be welcomed. And this isn't just theory, you know? This way of thinking leads to real concrete solutions, a lot of them recommended by the people in that UCL study. We're talking about things like using practical work trials instead of just relying on a standard interview, providing clear agendas beforehand to cut down on anxiety, training recruiters to actually understand neurodiversity, and writing job descriptions that focus on the actual skills you need, not some vague term like good communication skills. These are simple changes that remove barriers for everyone. You know, at the end of the day, this isn't just about being fair, though of course that's hugely important. This is about realizing that we are leaving an immense amount of human potential completely untapped. The world is facing some incredibly complex problems right now. And as this quote says, we can't expect to solve them using the same old ways of thinking. We need people who see the world differently, people who come at problems from totally unique angles. Embracing neurodiversity isn't just a nice thing to do. It's an absolute necessity for innovation. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. By building our systems, our workplaces, and our hiring processes for only one type of mind, what are we losing? What breakthroughs, what brilliant ideas, what incredible potential is still locked away simply because we haven't bothered to build the right key?